Hey, this is the World Advice Channel 2. What I want to talk about today is a topic of what if black people left America, okay? So for this video, I'll discuss what would actually happen in a scenario like that in a simple, straightforward, and unbiased way so anyone can understand it. So if you are interested in knowing what would happen, you know, then watch this video and you will find out. So now I mentioned that, let's get started. So when it comes to the topic of what would happen if black people left America, which of course to racist people is their dream, their $1 million dream to them, the simple answer to the question when it comes to the question of would America actually be better off, the simple answer is no, and simply put it, to add to that, they would find a new enemy, number one. Now let me explain. So the truth about it, as anyone knows anything about racist people, and of course white culture at a fundamental level that is racist and historically has been racist. Thankfully the majority of white people today are not racist, at least for the most part. They're not racist, but when it comes to their culture, and of course their culture historically, it has been racist and it still is racist for that very matter, okay? And the truth of the matter is, when it comes to the whole topic of if black people left America, as according to these race people, America would be so much better off, it'd be so much happier, everything would be peaceful, and so on and so forth. There'd be butterflies in the air, the air would smell better, America's problems would completely go away overnight, especially with with the amount of money that America has used up, and we'd have flying cars and massive 3,000 plus buildings and all that type of stuff for that matter. In all honesty, the simple answer to that question, I couldn't be further from the truth. Because the truth of the matter is, not only would, of course, as I was getting at before, they'd find a new enemy, number one. The truth of the matter is, as well, to add to that as well, America's issues that it has, especially with the amount of deficit that they had, a lot of that stuff, the majority of that money that America has used up, has literally nothing to do with black people, for that matter. Especially when you take into consideration that the Republicans also elected a leader who created silly wars that were not really needed. From, like, for example, the Iraq and Afghanistan war, specifically, of course, the Iraq war, and that just easily wasted over 10 trillion plus dollars, and even the Afghanistan war is kind of fishy because couldn't they have sent a SEAL team or special forces in to take out Osama bin Laden? Something's kind of adding up there, if anything, and but either way, the point of the matter is that they used up a lot of money that fighting a war, specifically, particularly for the Iraq War, that used up the most amount of money, had the most amount of casualties. When you would later find out that there's no weapons of mass destructions, and it's been proven numerous times, it was a complete fucking lie. The simple truth of the matter is, when it comes to that particular topic, in all honesty, is when it comes to that particular issue, that has nothing to do with black people. So to think that, oh, black people are going to disappear overnight or our problems are going to be going away, doesn't really make any sense, especially from that factor, when you, of course, take that into consideration, you know, for that matter. Okay. So that's the first thing I want to get across. And to continue on with my point about what would happen if we were to go away in terms of like, would there actually be harmony between all the citizens of America? The simple answer is no. Because the truth of the matter is, as history has shown, especially people who actually pay attention to history, white people will only treat you as well and speak highly of you as long as every single person, as much as possible, stays in line. But the moment you get out of line, they will start turning on you, even if it's a small portion that are that act up. Okay, look at it, Muslims, for example. When Muslims before 9/11 were actually critically acclaimed, there was so much praise, so much love for Muslim and Arab culture. Okay, you had shows like Aladdin, you had movies like Kazam, which is a movie about a genie. They spoke very highly of them at a time in the New York Times, and all these people just keep on writing good things about Muslims. Other words, slash Arabs, Muslim slash Arabs, whatever you like to say. Okay, then when 9/11 happened, it all changed. Everyone turned on Islam. Newspapers that once spoke very highly about them and their culture started to speak poorly about them. You know, places, people that once had reservations for restaurants that, of course, were meant to, of course, that would, of course, were Muslim restaurants, Arab restaurants in the Middle East, canceled their orders overnight. A lot of people who were once good friends with Muslims, Arabs, for that matter, Muslims/Arabs, started to turn on them and started to attack them. There is numerous cases of that happening just over a situation that happened over one day. And that's, one day that only killed like 2,000 Americans when it was easily, even at the time, over 300 million Americans, you know? So, like, okay, like that makes perfect sense. And that's not even taking consideration as well what they were trying to pull off with Chinese people when COVID happened. They were, as we all know, Chinese people are critically acclaimed in American culture. Just overnight, to put it bluntly, to be quite honest with you, they started to hate Chinese people, a lot of people, and everyone was just starting to be racist towards them and stuff, and and mistreating them and speaking poorly about them, saying you guys are disgusting, you guys eat dogs, and so on and so forth. It was getting pretty racist overnight. When everyone knows that in our culture, outside of white people, people speak the highest about East Asians, specifically, of course, people from China, Japan, which I sometimes can't even discern the difference between the two, but mostly they speak very highly about the Chinese, for that matter, okay? Okay? To explain my point fully, they speak very highly about the Chinese. And then the Chinese, of course, COVID happened and they started turning on them, as I show you. I look at Indians too, they spoke very highly about them at one point. Now these Indian street videos come out, they speak poorly about them now. So it's the same thing though. As long as something slight happens, even if it's a small portion of the community, they will turn on you. And that's not even taking into consideration all the racism they even have amongst themselves, and even how they mistreated, no surprise, each other in the past. Look at how much wars and how much violence and stuff they had in medieval Europe. That's way before they colonized the world and went all over the place. So what does that show you? There you go. So to answer your question, knowing human nature in general, just knowing the nature of racist white people, at least the ones, of course, as I was getting at, are racist, they'll find someone who's a new enemy, number one. And I personally suspect it would probably target Hispanics, because that's the biggest demographic that competes with them, since they're the second biggest demographic. And I just feel they just give them a hard time and find a way to complain about them and so on and so forth. And that is what I have to say. So to answer your question, no, it would not be some magical paradise, and they'll just find a new enemy, number one. And that's the first point I want to get across. Now, when it comes to my main point I want to get across for my message of this video, what my main point in the message of for this video is that when it comes to us black people, we need to stop being so critical of ourselves. Is there things we need to improve upon? Yes. But in short, to put it bluntly, we need to realize in the end of the day, we don't have to live our lives in in shame just because of a small portion of what our community is doing, for that matter, okay? Specifically referring to the ones who live in the suburbs and act like they're gangsters when they don't have to act like they're gangsters, for crying out loud, okay? That's the ones I'm referring to specifically, them, for crying out loud. Because the truth of the matter is, in the end of the day, when you look at it in the end of the day, most of the problems America has nothing to do with us, in all honesty. A lot of things that happen have nothing to do with us. Just like World War One and World War Two, that were big issues facing America, and the Vietnam War. What the hell does that have to do with black people whatsoever? You know? And not to mention all the wars that happened afterwards, especially, of course, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. What the hell does that have to do with black people? And that's exactly what I'm trying to get across here. Simply put it, man, there is no need for us to live our lives in criticalness. I do know some of what we need as a community to do better. We need to be more punctual, which means showing up on time to things. We need to actually, of course, no surprise as well, you know, start being more organized. We need to start, not overcharging each other in businesses. We need to start diversifying the jobs we want to do instead of just want to become a rapper slash musician slash sports athlete. We need to diversify our job field. But at the end of the day, when you look at it in the greater scheme of things, how much trouble or threat do we pose to the American people in general, specifically referring to America, of course, because it's the biggest portion of black people in North America. So, of course, that's the one we need to focus on. When it comes to it in general as a whole, of course, no surprise, what does that have to do with us black people in general as a whole, for that matter, okay? It has nothing to do with us, for that matter, to put it bluntly. Okay, nothing. What the hell does that have to do with anything? To be quite blunt and honest with you, that has nothing to do with us. What's going on in all across the world and the Middle East and all that sort of stuff. So for us to feel critical and feel ashamed of it, it's not our fault. Especially with the fact when you take into consideration most of the issues that threaten the world the most, global warming, environmental destruction, and nuclear weapons, were developed by white people. So in short, we need to stop feeling ashamed of ourselves. And this is my video. I hope you got the message. And this is off to say, and simply put it, do not blame yourselves. And that is all. Bye.